Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's 2019 Health Innovation at Work mini-session. Please note that all participant lines will be on listen-only mode for the duration of this presentation. Should you require technical assistance, send a private note to the event producer via the chat panel located on the lower right-hand side of your screen, or call our help desk at 1-888-796-6118. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Nurse Jessie. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2019 Health Innovations at Work mini-session, Be Assertive, Not Aggressive, Empowered Communication for Life. As you know, these are virtual gatherings focused on topics that you've asked to learn more about. 30 minutes with relevant best practice strategies delivered by local and now sometimes national experts. Thank you for submitting your questions. For our featured host, thank you for listening, and also thank you for sharing these important messages with your organization. Our featured guest today is Terra Fletcher, and we've been asking our employers, our employees, what they wanted or needed to learn more about, and we've heard this message of improving communication, building trust, improving civility within the teams come through loud and clear. We want that culture, but we really aren't sure how to have it. And that's why we've really invited Terra in as an expert communicator. Terra Fletcher of Fletcher Consulting to share with us the fundamentals of assertive communication. You can see by her decorated bio here in front of you, she's had more than a decade of business development, including being an instructor at NWTC Technical College, where she trained us here at Ballot Health for some of her students. And I love the fact that she reads the back of every package, doesn't fast forward the previews, and goes to the beach, which is such a thing I resonate with during this time in Northeast Wisconsin.
I'm pretending that I'm at the beach right now.
Me too. So thanks for being here, Terra. I wanted to kind of hand over the reins a little bit to Terra here and talk about where we're headed with this discussion today, and also to frame it up from your standpoint when you're working with organizations, why is this such an important topic when you're talking about business and productivity and just ultimate success?
Well, these are the things we're not taught in schools. You know, and that kills me in a sense. I'm really passionate about understanding our communication because it basically takes 18 years of our life for our parents to mess us up. I mean, I'm not saying that it's either best,
right?
You know, but we ingrain these habits so quickly and so deeply as children that it really does take a lot of time for us to come to know why do we communicate a certain way. We have predominant communication styles. There's really kind of a spectrum depending how assertive, how aggressive, how passive we are. And we tend to fall in one of those primary categories. And if we are not communicating in a way that gets us what we want at work, that's really where that awareness of looking for ways to improve and be more flexible in our communication comes in. Another thing that I'm excited to share with you today, other than just understanding those styles and being more assertive in the workplace, is the 4-part assertion message. What's really cool about this is it's a tool, it's a tactic, it's a technique that every one of us can take with us out the door and implement it to have some of the most difficult conversations. And what I like about it, too, is I think it's really easy to remember, not always easy to implement,
right?
But if we take the time to start small and practice it in little things in our lives, it'll get easier, and then in the most difficult confrontation situation, hopefully we'll handle it a little bit better.
Perfect. I love actionable tools.
Okay. And, you know, this kind of alludes to your point, too, Nurse Jessie, when you talked about the conflict, the trust in the workplace, because we're all aware of what the symptoms are. We know what it looks like. You know, when we don't manage conflict well, we see passive-aggressive behavior. We see people being pushed further to the poles of either being really aggressive or really passive to try to appease the other person. Or we silo and problems don't get fixed, or we don't work together and we're not as productive or efficient or happy in the workplace. We even see health problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure you're more aware of that probably than a lot of
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at the word conflict and you see kind of the stress that's occurring within that. being an on-site provider, I mean, we definitely saw that workplace is the cause of stress and health problems. I think another thing that really highlights the necessity of these conversations is the fact that people leave managers, not jobs. And the number one reason why is they think that the manager doesn't like them. So if you think of this, conflict, whether it be overt and noticeable, or maybe, like you said, the passive-aggressive, feeling like a victim, feeling like you don't have that power to determine your destiny at work, these are really necessary conversations.
So here we've got 3 steps for getting us started. So perhaps the first thing we need to consider is, what is our own style? Are we even aware of how we communicate? And remember, too, that what we think we're putting out to the world might not be how they see it, how they perceive, how they receive those messages. Sometimes there's a little discord there in that place, too. So the self-awareness, I think, is really, really important and tough.
Yeah, and I guess when I saw this, I wanted to also share my own personal, insights, is that this awareness can be really, really difficult at times, but I think it takes this certain curiosity. I wonder why they're reacting this way. Like, if it's a pattern in their life, I wonder why. Or I wonder what, why I'm feeling this way, or what am I feeling. It takes a curiosity or just a willingness to go there. And in fact, it takes a little bit of bravery, I think, courage, to be able to look at that and say, what's really not working for me. And so it begins with us who are hearing this message today, because we can't rely that our manager or supervisor or whoever is getting the same message, but really taking this on as our own self-empowerment practice.
Absolutely, and we're the only one we can change.
Absolutely.
We can work with other people to try to help them to explore their own communication styles, but really it does start with us as individuals. There's a book that I mentioned in the resource and citations at the end of our time together this morning, but it's How to Ask for and Get What You Want by Sam Deep and Lyle Sussman. What I really like about that book is it takes 44 different types of difficult people, and I'll let you know a little secret, Nurse Jessie. We're all difficult people. But what I love about this book is you find out, what type of difficult person am I? It's a tough mirror to look at, but I know I definitely found myself in there. I know one place I found myself is perfectionist. I definitely found myself there. But it answers some of those very questions you brought up. How do we respond if we keep seeing the same problem over and over, or we keep missing the mark, our message isn't being received the way that it should be? And that book helps with that, too, because it says, if you seem to work with a disordinate number of this type of difficult person, maybe you're not doing this right. So that's a really, really good. It's not a new book. It's been out for a while already, but it's very, very good. If you ever work with another human being ever, highly recommend.
Great.
So patience and practice, then, once we know, it takes a lot of work to change. We said, this has been an ingrained style, so it's going to take being patient with ourselves to be able to implement some of those changes, and practice. And we're going to start with little steps and little things that we can do, and those hopefully will translate into even more difficult situations in the future. So this graphic here, I really like from our previous conversation too, Nurse Jessie, how it kind of finds the middle ground. We've got aggressive and passive individuals. An aggressive individual is only concerned with their own needs. A passive individual is only concerned with the needs of others. So we're talking about here about finding a balance in the workplace is an assertive communication style, which really meets those two in the middle. We said it's a spectrum. Depending on where we are in that spectrum, we want to kind of work to that assertive ground, which generally in this culture, I have to add a little disclaimer, in this culture, in this country, that is what is expected in the workplace in general. That's not the case in other places. Some places fall in different lines of the spectrum as what's more socially acceptable in those communities. So we're kind of speaking in generalities here. So let's take a look at these communication styles a little bit more in depth. Now we're noticing here there's a third one that's added onto this image, and that's passive aggressive. So it takes some of the characteristics from each end of the spectrum and kind of couples there together, and unfortunately that's a lose-lose passive-aggressive behavior. If we've ever dealt with that with a coworker, we know that can be really challenging because it does not fix the problem. It's the passive afraid to confront, but the aggressive doing something negative. Those are those behind-your-back dirty things that people do. I'm going to show them. I'm going to, turn it in 5 minutes before the bell rings, or they're going to know that I'm mad when I don't talk to them for a week. It doesn't work. It doesn't fix anything. If we look at a passive, we said they're concerned with the needs of others, so they're not speaking up for their own needs. Whereas an aggressor is only concerned about their own needs, their own rights. An assertive finds that middle ground. We're looking for a win-win balance of needs and rights. So what exactly is the assertive style? So if we see something particularly that we recognize that we're not maybe fulfilling yet on this list, that might be a place that we want to start with that awareness, patience, and practice to improve in being assertive. So we said an assertive person is concerned with their own rights and needs and the rights and needs of others. So in order to be able to communicate in an assertive way, we would have to therefore be direct and honest with our needs and wants. Someone who's assertive is able to give their opinion, they set limits, they stand up for their rights, and they do respect, again, the rights of others. It's that balance, that middle of our Venn diagram that we're looking at here. And to kind of give you a more specific message. Now, the words may not be, they may be, but they may not be, but the basic message of an assertive communication style is this. This is what I think, this is what I feel, this is how I see the situation. Now, in an assertive style as well, we think about the posture. We're all sitting up straight now here in the conference room. We're thinking about posture. An assertive individual, their body language and their message need to match. And this is hard. This is really hard. I know for me this is a tough one because by nature I'm a very shy and quiet and reserved person. I have to remind myself, put my shoulders back, to stand up straight, not have my hands in front of me. As a public speaker, I'm still working on that, not having my hands in front of me to try to protect myself, to be open. Our body language, our posture makes a huge difference in the way those messages are received. In order to get that basic message across, they have to align with each other. Our words, our body language has to be in agreement. Because people are going to notice it if they're not.
Well, I think that you bring up an interesting point with the body language, and I think even beyond that or before that is the belief. So, I mean, it comes back to being aware, self-aware, but the belief that your needs matter and my needs matter. So it might be even reframing almost like your whole, viewpoint of life when you come into these things. And I do believe that people are brought into our life to try to teach us things about ourselves. And so even, like you've mentioned, that we're all difficult people, but we're learning something from every interaction that we do. So what a great message that, this empowerment at work can translate into all sorts of empowerment all over our life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, that's really powerful for me, too. I love when I have the opportunity to teach communication because, like you talked about this, we're talking about it at work today, but it does transfer. I've had people come up to me after sessions. I'll have someone in my audience who will just break down in the middle of a communication training, just will be crying. I had a woman come up to me after and go, now I know why my first marriage didn't work. And it's like we have this light bulb moment sometimes where all of a sudden it just makes sense. But we can't grow if we're not open to those messages, if we're not looking for those opportunities. So I appreciate that. And yeah, absolutely, these are things that will help us in all areas of our life. So if we look at the passive style, now what's interesting too with the passive style, the words in the message here may not be these words, but the message that received along with the body language, this is the message that people are going to be getting. A passive communicator often takes up less space, rounded shoulders, small spaces, softer voices, sometimes even a downcast face and looking down at the ground. Perhaps we can picture an individual who has that kind of communication style. And it's going to sound different. Their words are not going to be conveyed in an assertive voice. They're going to be more passive in their tone. It's going to sound something like, my feelings don't matter. Only yours do. My thoughts are important. Yours are the only ones worth listening to. I'm nothing. You're superior. Passive communicators at work apologize for their opinion. They say, I'm sorry, but. They say, this is probably stupid, but. They discount what they're saying before they even put it out there to the world. So again, it definitely speaks to that level of inner confidence and self-esteem. Those are some of our biggest barriers to communication, is what we believe about ourselves. An aggressor, on the other hand, now this is interesting because people are often surprised to find out that someone who is aggressive often is also suffering from low self-esteem. It's more common in men. It's more of a covert type of depression or struggling with issues with themselves, and this just manifests in a different way. So an aggressive person tends to take up more space, be louder, project their voice more, and their words may not be, but their message is going to be something like this. This is what I think. You're stupid for believing differently. This is what I want. What you want, not important. This is how I feel, and your feelings don't matter. That's about as loud as I can get in the little conference room this morning. But we know what it sounds like. We've seen it. We've seen, unfortunately, in the workplace. And what's really, really difficult is oftentimes bosses get there because they behave badly. So that can really be a challenge in the workplace. It's really hard to have this kind of conversation with someone who is your superior at work. It's not always the boss who's the aggressor. It can be other positions, but sometimes, unfortunately, that's how people get there, by behaving badly, by bringing others down, because remember, they're only concerned with their own needs. They discount everyone else. They tell them they're stupid, and the passive individual is going to continue to go further to their spectrum, and the aggressor is going to continue to go down on their other end of this.
I think for sure this is where we need to preface this with, that gentle curiosity, because that issue of, even self-forgiveness, if you're here and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is what I've been, saying or doing, I've been guilty as charged, is that it's just being aware and really being able to kind of go back to the second slide, was I'm going to practice something different from now on. I'm going to be gentle with myself and really going into that self-awareness piece of I'm wondering why, what's behind this from me.
Yeah, absolutely. The patience again is for ourselves. When I say awareness, patience, practice. There's also on my website a link to an assertiveness assessment. So if you're not sure, you can take that quiz for yourself in the privacy of your own home and give yourself the score, and it'll put you on the spectrum, so you can kind of get a temperature of where you're at for that. But for now, we're going to look a little bit more closely at assertive communication. How can we get closer to that middle ground where we all would like to be at work? So we kind of touched on a few of these already, the barriers to assertive communication. Stress, of course. We behave difficultly when we're under stress. We are those difficult people. We behave badly. We become either, if we have a passive tendency, we'll become more passive. If we have an aggressive tendency, we'll become more aggressive when we're under stress. And we're all so stressed out, so this is really, really difficult. My biggest recommendation for you in this case is, especially if you want to have some sort of confrontation or accountability conversation, is that you need to find the right time, right? The timing is so, so crucial. And to give yourself the time to prepare for it. There's no reason we can't, for example, prepare a 4-part assertion message before we have these conversations. And I don't know about you, but I'm one who does a lot better writing, I think, than I do speaking. So I love to have that time to be able to really get my thoughts in order first. Our social barriers and our construction, obviously there are a lot of factors that go into what is expected. What does the world expect from us? How do they expect us to behave? Culture plays a huge role in this. And gender makes a difference too in the workplace. Men and women are expected to behave differently. We know assertive women, what they tend to be labeled in the workplace, but a man who does the same thing might be called a good leader. So social barriers get in our way of communicating effectively. Beliefs, too, that's definitely what we talked about earlier, our belief in ourselves. If we don't believe that our needs and rights and wants have value, it's going to be really hard to say that out loud. So that's definitely a patience and practice piece as well. So a few things that we can do. This is a really great way to start with some easy steps to being a little bit more assertive. So in our kind of our message for our assertive personality type is, this is what I want, this is what I feel, this is how I think, this is how I see the situation, is just to try to start incorporating more of those I statements into your conversation. And that will work if you're more passive, but it'll also work if you're more aggressive, because aggressors use a lot more you. Absolutely. So try to focus on that. Focus on facts, be specific, use numbers, state behaviors. We'll talk about that in our 4-part message as well. But being direct and honest, straightforward, all this will help us to be more assertive. It doesn't always mean that we are blunt or unkind, though, either.
Respectful,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's take a look then at the 4-part assertion message. Now, the 4-part assertion message, here are some times we want to use it. I will tell you the best advice I ever heard about this. So if you're not sure if you need to confront someone, that you've got two choices. You can either forgive and forget and move on with your life, or you can go and talk to them. If you can't go and talk to them, you have to forgive and forget and just move on with your life. But if you can't forgive and forget and move on with your life, that's where that unhealthy stress and those physical problems come from.
Right.
A lot of, especially our passive individuals who don't confront, will have stomach issues. Those are really common with our more passive individuals. So if we can't let it go, that tells us we need to go and talk to them. Here's a few specific instances that might be helpful for the 4-part assertion message. If somebody else's behavior is interfering with your work, taking too much time, harming people or possessions, if it's costing money, causing extra work, or, of course, this would be a really important one too, how is it impacting client perception? If someone's behaving poorly in front of customers, that's serious. These are times where we do need to confront someone. And this is definitely not an all-inclusive list, but I'm going to do a check for you if you're unsure. So here's the 4-part assertion message. It's a behavior description, followed by a feeling message, a consequence statement, and then a request statement. So this is why I think it's pretty easy to remember, because just if we can get those 4 green words down, behavior, feeling, consequence, and request, that will help us to remember and be able to use this technique. So I know it's cheesy and everyone's, listening. If you're in the privacy of your own office or your own home, perhaps you're comfortable even saying those out loud to help to tie that to your memory. But if you would say those words with me, that would be fantastic. So we've got 4 words, and we're going to say them out loud, and we're going to say them together. And behavior, feeling, consequence, request. Come with me. Behavior, feeling, consequence, and request. Thank you. So here's an example. Tom, twice this week you left the supply cabinet unlocked. So that is a specific description of the behavior. I am very anxious about the situation. People need to know that their behavior impacts our feelings because supplies are missing that our department will be responsible for. Natural consequence. I need you to be responsible to lock the cabinet when you're finished, or you will no longer be able to use my keys. So it sounds pretty simple, but in reality, is this what we say?
It takes courage.
It does. It does. And you know what we do? We either let it go and ignore it and don't say anything, or we wait until we're so mad we blow up and go, Tom, why do you always leave the cabinet unlocked? You're trying to sabotage our department. Not an effective use it. Yeah. So let's break down behavior. Again, only things that you can observe. We're not saying that they're trying to sabotage the department. We don't know why people do the things they do. We might think we do. We don't. We don't know why. But it should be specific twice this week. If we're overgeneralized and act with salute, if we say, you always or you never, they're going to say, that's not true. Not going to work. Feeling. Claim ownership of your own feelings. Again, this is really hard for a lot of us. A lot of us don't even have the vocabulary for the feelings. There are hundreds, and we could name it, I don't know, can we name a dozen feelings? I don't know. So this is another thing I encourage with awareness, too, is to be aware of your own feelings and help your children with this, too. If you have kids, point it out to them. You seem hurt. You seem annoyed. You seem upset. You seem troubled. Whatever it is, help them to build that vocabulary. To have a precise label for their feelings and control it emotionally. And again, this is where that having that self-assertiveness and being able to be emotionally safe in your workplace is really important. Also, to have distance. If you're not ready in the moment to have this conversation, put it away until you are in a state where you can control your emotions to deliver your message. So consequence. So the consequence needs to be something tangible. It answers the feeling message why with because. So they see the effects of the behavior that what they're doing is having on you. And again, direct and honest. We're not being threatening in this consequence statement. A request says, okay, so we know what the problem is. We know what the emotions were. Now what do we want them to do about it? It's going to reduce the problem. It should be direct and specific. But that doesn't mean we're done. And this is the hard part too, because we get really good at practicing this. Okay, I'm gonna talk to them, and this is what I'm gonna say, and we get it all out there, and then we think we're done. But the conversation probably isn't over yet. We have to allow them to respond, listen for alternative suggestions, and that listening piece, we can't stress that enough. We have to be willing to listen at this point in time to continue the conversation to figure out, hey, maybe they're giving their keys to someone else. Maybe that's not even the real problem. Maybe they need their own keys. I don't know what the problem was with Tom, but whatever the problem is, we have to be willing to continue the conversation after we've said our piece. That's just the first step.
And I think this part, like the consequence and the request, I think to me sound a lot like, you know, the healthy boundaries and really saying, you know, again, here's where you end, I start, here's how together we're creating this situation. And I think really the most difficult piece that you need to practice in is the must allow for response. and I think there's a phrase out there, it's like, how can you listen to really listen versus listen to be right? And so it's like, for me, like you said, it's easy, it's been, with practice, easier to write it out and, okay, here I'm going to say this, and then when they go to speak, I mean, that really is that point of self-awareness to stay in that power position, like, hey, their point is valid, mine is too. It doesn't negate it, you know, and having that exchange within there.
And that's where all those other assertiveness skills are going to help you with that, too. Absolutely. Thank you. So I do have another example for a 4-part assertion message. I also want to put it out there, too, if you have questions about specific issues that you're dealing with, we could take those offline after our conversation. But I just wanted to share this other example with you as well. So I'll just read this 4-part assertion message. Now, how you deliver it is going to depend as well. A lot of these we're going to have in person, face-to-face. If it's something you need a paper trail of, you might want to also follow up with an email, for example. So here's a similar one. We're starting with something very specific in our behavior. Twice this week, Nurse Jessie, you were late for covering the phones over my lunch break. I'm frustrated because my lunch is shortened. I don't feel refreshed when I return to my desk. The added stress impacts my ability to effectively deal with visitors and answer phone calls. I need you to arrive on time each day, or I will extend the end of my lunch break to ensure I receive the full 30 minutes my contract allows. And again, that sounds simple, but that's not what we say when we're upset and when we're stressed. We either become passive-aggressive and do dirty things behind their back and show up 20 minutes late without telling them why, or we blow up in their face and say, Nurse Jessie, why would you do this to me? You're so selfish. That's what we do in reality. So behavior, feeling, consequence, and request. If we take a little time to think it through, we'll come across with a much better message than probably our first thought. I wanted to share this with you briefly as well. It really speaks again to that awareness piece because we are all capable of achieving fantastic things in our personal lives, whether it's climbing mountains like some of us did recently, running marathons, or finishing my first book, hopefully very, very soon. Yay. We're all capable of great things, but we have all of these filters, these things that get in our way. And it could be those social barriers that we talked about. It could be our personal beliefs about ourselves that we talked about, our inabilities to communicate in the way that we would like to, or just procrastination or the excuses that we make. But what do we get at the end? Our results, unfortunately, are not the size of our capabilities. But if we can break down even just 1 or 2 of those filters, we'll get a lot bigger results in our personal and professional lives. So I would encourage everyone who's on the call today to take a minute to think about what is limiting you from getting the results that you want, and what is one concrete step or action you can take to improve and move forward.
I love that call to action, Terra, because not only are we talking about improving workplace trust culture, improving civility within our culture, improving our relationships, and exactly what you said, improving our whole life. With just the starting of, I guess, a willingness to change, a willingness to grow, a willingness to take a closer look at, you know, even beginning with the results. Why am I having so many of these patterns arising in my life, and what could I do differently? And I think you've given us the tool of the 4-part assertion message, and also being able to determine where we may be sat in those different communication styles. So I wanted to say to Terra, thank you for being here, and I also wanted to have you guys look out. She actually provided great resources and citations for you guys to next step resources. And then also connecting with Terra, she's going to be at the Women's Business Summit at NWTC on March 8th, also at Titletown. Be looking for her book to come out in March or April. And we just invite you to connect with Terra, see what she's about, see if she can help your organization in improving communication. We've also provided you with Terra's contact information. And we also invite you to our next month's Health Innovation at Work mini session, Happiness, a Business Strategy with Virginia Pavier. She's CEO and co-founder of Happicus. So we invite you to register for that. We will send out the link soon. But before we end today's session, I just wanted to ask Terra, our question that we asked last year was, Terra, if you were to be on a TV sitcom, who would play you in that TV sitcom?
Oh, that is a great question. You know, physically the only famous person I can think of that I've been told I look like was Jennifer Garner, but I think that was just because we kind of had the same hair for a while. But otherwise, I really like, what's her name? Dax Shepard's wife. Dax Shepard's Kristen Bell.
There we go.
I love her. She's great. She's so great. She seems like just such a real person. I think I would be very flattered for either one of those lovely ladies.
And Terra, you are very real, and thank you for sharing your real-life stories and your gift and challenge with us today. Thank you all for attending.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.